live. Should I hit it?
Mm-hmm. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Live from the Table. We're here live at 117 McDougal Street, above the Comedy Cellar. I'm here with my very good friend, Ms. Periel Ashenbrand. Say hello, Periel.
Hello.
And, of course, we're going to be discussing legal matters today. So at the last minute, my partner and lawyer, Dan Natterman, has decided to call in sick. So I don't know how we're going to argue. Hey, Steve, play that, turn it up. This is the best part. All right, so that's a little theme song that I recorded many years ago when I thought this was going to be a comedy podcast. I think I have to write a new podcast now. Obviously, I was inspired by like Dixieland songs when I did that, so I think I'm going to listen to like the soundtrack from Schindler's List to maybe get some inspiration for our next theme song. In any case, so I don't know what we're going to take some calls later on. We have, what's his name, Professor?
Robert Jan Van Pelt.
Van Pelt, who was the gas chamber expert at the David Irving trial. So, I figured like there's so much Holocaust denial going on now, and there's a whole thing about the cookies, that guy wore, what's his name, Myron Gaines wore at Turning Point, which refers to a Nick Fuentes video we're going to play. So I figured, why don't we go to get the actual world expert on gas chambers. And I don't know what he's going to say. I hope he's going to say it happened. It would be nice if it didn't happen, but I hope he's going to say it happened. Anyway, but before we do that, Scott Adams died.
That's right.
And
Dilbert Cartoonist.
Dilbert Cartoonist. Scott Adams was a complicated figure who I had some, interface with. And although he was a kind of conspiracy theorist at times, and there were areas where I disagreed with him, and even though I tweeted recently that you can't take certain people a la carte, I think Scott Adams is one of the people that you must take a la carte. I always say there's a genius exception to everything. Like in music, I always tell people, well, these are the rules. But of course, there's a genius exception to everything, because great geniuses, rules are basically rules of thumb. They're the basic parameters that everybody agrees you should stick to through many years of experience. But, great geniuses have to be reckoned with. And Scott Adams, I think, was actually a great genius. And I first met him. I knew of him. I met him when we did our Phil Bump interview, our infamous Phil Bump interview. He did a podcast about our interview, and he complimented me, and he called me a star, and he was just gushing about me. Lest you think I'm saying this to talk about myself, that's not how this story ends. And so I emailed him. I thanked him. I told him I'd read a few of his books. I was very influenced by them. And I asked him would he come on the podcast. And he said, I'll be happy to do your podcast. I'd be thrilled to do your podcast. So I interviewed him. It was one of these interviews I did with Coleman Hughes. And right around that time, he had gotten himself in trouble by saying some pretty ugly things about how white people shouldn't have any part of black people, and he got canceled, and everybody dropped his cartoon and all that stuff. So we did our interview, and I felt like, the mission statement of a podcast is to ask the questions that you have to ask. So I felt like I had to ask him about these things that he said, and about, I had also heard on a podcast where he described himself as having a bipolar disorder, and I thought, well, maybe you had a manic day when you said those things, and we got into Tucker Carlson, and it was one little section of the interview. I confronted him with some tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Everybody in my life, what the hell is the matter with you? Why did you ask Scott Adams those tough questions? How, like you leave him alone, like, because they love Scott Adams, right? So like, because it's kind of like the Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens thing, because they love Scott Adams and because he's always kind of been on the team of the people that I was talking to. They were just outraged that I asked him these questions, and they made me question myself. Like, was I boorish and stuff? Like, did I cross the line? Even though I didn't really see how I could have interviewed him without asking those questions. But anyway, so I emailed him and I said, listen, people are saying this to me. I hope you weren't bothered by the interview. And this is all leading up to, I'm going to read his interview, his email back to me, which shows what a classy guy he was. Hi, Noam. All great questions. The time went by fast. It's so easy to talk to smart people, the obvious exception being Sam Harris. Thanks for giving my book to your son. That's the best compliment an author could ever get. Yes, let's get together in New York City. Would be fun. Scott. So this is a grown-up. He understood. I didn't have to explain it to him. Yeah, of course. I said these things. I got in trouble. You're interviewing me. Of course you're going to ask me about these things. Not a hint of animosity, unless one thinks that he was just bullshitting me, but I don't think that he was.
No.
And since then, we've had some interactions. He'd answer me on Twitter from time to time. We never did actually meet in person. So anyway, so that's my little interaction with Scott Adams. I would recommend his books. I think it's Win Bigly, Reframe Your Brain, and then that epic interview that he did with Sam Harris. You can look up the interview that he did with us too, but really the interview he did with Sam Harris, where literally Sam Harris's head was going to explode because of the ingenious way that Scott Adams managed to defend Trump at every single turn. And, from time to time, I think he was right. But of course, I am partial often to Sam Harris's way of looking at things as well. So anyway, rest in peace, Scott Adams. Oh, and one more thing. And it reminds me of my father, you imagine that you can tell something about somebody when they know the end is imminent. Like when you know you're going to die in a week or two, why are you still putting on airs? And the reason it reminds me of my father is because, I might have told this story before, when he was a few days from death, there was a call from the olive tree, the hummus was sour. And and he was on the phone. He was screaming, "You tell Tawil, get the motherfucker!" like screaming, like I was today, Liz, about the chicken, like screaming, like. And he hangs up the phone, and he turned to me. My father didn't believe in God, and he says to me, "Noam, I thought, who cares what happens after you're dead?" He says, "But I do. I care." Maybe like he cared about the hummus to his dying breath, because this was him. This was his life's work. And so Scott Adams did his show to the very end. And he said basically the same things. He didn't unload as some kind of massive racist or massive anti-Semite, which indicates to me that what he had been saying all along was within the bounds of what he believed. He may not like it, but that's the way he felt. He was honest, and he obviously, people say, like Megyn, she's doing it for the money. And I always tell you, it's not for the money. It's not for the money. Well, Scott Adams wasn't doing it for the money. When he got the diagnosis that he had X number of months to live, he could have just said, me, that would be the last time you'd see me on this show. This is not my, or maybe not, but he did not decide, well, this is a good time for me to spend time with my loved ones or whatever it is. He did his show to the very end because this was what he cared about. This was his life. This is what he would always rather be doing. And I think it's very important that people look at that Scott Adams example from every angle when they want to write off Tucker Carlson as Qatari money or Megyn Kelly as this. I mean, those are people on a particular side, but on any side of this is not, like whenever you want to write off the person that you want to dismiss as doing it for venal reasons, for money, for this, don't be so sure. Don't be so sure that people are doing things, because it's hard to imagine people who have that much money doing things for money. Right? Like this is not what motivates them. And it was clearly not what motivated Scott Adams. So, okay, rest in peace, Scott Adams. I'm sorry we never got to meet in person. Your books will live on in my mind. All right, that's number one. Number two, I wanted to argue with Dan about this ICE shooting in Minnesota. I don't know if you have any opinion on it. I'm sure the world would like to know your legal analysis of it. We'll take some calls on it, too.
I mean...
And I'm going to show a video. Go ahead.
I have a feeling that I know what you're going to say, but why don't you say...
No, you're like the every person.
I don't like being like put into like some like crappy fucking category by you. Like I'm going to have some like dumb opinion about it.
Can I ask you a question, though?
What?
When you decided to get dressed to come to work today...
Yeah.
Did you think that we wanted you here to not give your opinion? Like, what the hell do you think you're doing in that chair?
Listen, I think what's going on with ICE is terrible. And I think that what happened to that woman is horrible. And I can't give you some like deep legal analysis, but I don't think you need to be able to give like a deep legal analysis to know that like maybe shooting...
You know what? You were right.
That maybe just like shooting somebody at like a point blank range, like through your windshield, is like not the way to handle. Like, was that necessary?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? It wasn't necessary. Okay.
Well, no, I mean,
so let's just introduce into the record, and we'll take calls. We have any calls already, Liz?
Yeah, we have a few people waiting.
So I'm gonna
is it
play
Kevin Brennan?
Oh God. So I'm gonna play. So I didn't have time to do the heavy work myself. So I'm gonna piggyback on the work of my. Excuse me. I have like a water bubble. Can you hit the mute button? I'm kidding. Mark Halpern, friend of mine, on his very good morning show, Two-Way. The morning meeting, he collected a bunch of the videos. I added one more video at the end. I think this pretty much will cover all the angles, and then we can talk about the videos, why I think the videos don't really matter so much, what I think, and then we'll take calls. So go ahead. Hit it, Mark.
I'm going to do my best to describe it here as it happens, so you can understand what we're all looking at and what we're using on basis. So freeze it right there, Kevin.
My thing is working?
If you would.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
So this is after the officers have approached the vehicle and they've asked her to get out of the vehicle.
Okay, let me just stop there. So as best as I can tell, and I haven't been reading about it, but I tried to do a little research, they do have the right to ask her to get out of the vehicle. I was wondering about that because they're ICE. They don't have the right to arrest people for crimes, but for some reason, as I was reading about it, at least a colorable right, if they have the proper circumstances, to ask somebody to get out of a vehicle. That's neither here nor there in the end to the story, but in case anybody's wondering about that, or if we have any experts who want to call in. But okay, so go ahead.
And she backs up and then she starts going forward. Now, you'll see three officers. The two closest to the vehicle are the most germane. One of them has asked her to get out. She's declined. The other officer is the officer who shoots. You see him obscured in the background. And I think the critical question for us here as we've watched these is, does he fire at her before he's hit by the car? Even then, that wouldn't mean, it wouldn't be dispositive that it's murder. Play the video, please. All right. This is a different angle. And it's the angle that's the clearest. As you can see, again, it's a little bit from a distance, but it's the clearest angle that shows, without a doubt, that the car hits her. Or the car hits him, rather. Play it again. Again, there's no doubt. There's some angles people have seen. You can't tell that the car hits him. This angle makes it clear. The car does hit him.
All right, so let me stop there also. I was going to say, when I saw that that I don't 100% agree with Mark here, that I thought the word hit was like doing a lot of work there. The car pushes him, makes contact, but it seems like it seems like he could have kind of stood his ground. And but however, just before the show, I saw some headlines that the guy was actually admitted to the hospital with quote unquote internal bleeding. Now that can just be nothing. It could be a bruise. I don't know what internal bleeding means. So, but I can't pretend I didn't read that. But
why not just move out of the way.
This is at very slow speed. Okay, we'll get to that. So anyway, but the video that Mark shows, it clearly does show the car making contact with him.
And it appears from the audio and the video that, again, he fires only after he's hit. Okay? Play number 6, please. Car backs up. This is in slow motion. Car backs up, and then it goes forward. Very close there in terms of the timing, but it appears that he is hit by the car speeding towards him. Okay? Now.
Okay. Out of the car.
This is the last. This is his cell phone camera. And boom. So from that angle too, it looks like it makes contact with him. The minute it makes contact with him, his camera goes up in the air and the shots fire. So okay.
So is the implication then that it went off accidentally? I'm not.
No. He shot her. I don't think anybody's claiming it accidentally. So the questions are here. What is the frame of the conversation? There's a criminal standard, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. There is a civil standard, which means you know the preponderance of that, more 51%. You think that he did something, and then there's just like you can shoot the shit standard beyond the law. Actually, before I give the definitive answer to this, and I will tell you all what the proper answers are. What does anybody want to call in?
We're going to bring Vincent in right now.
Okay.
We'll bring him in.
I think you should play my theme song every time we have technical.
Yo.
Hello, Vincent.
What you want, gang? You know who I am?
No, do I know who you are?
I've been talking to you on Twitter, bro.
Ah, I know who you are. Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay.
Ugh.
Where do you live, Vincent? Where do you live?
Great state of Florida.
Oh, nice. Okay, but we're running behind already. So go ahead, get to. Well, I have a feeling nothing I was going to say I'm going to be able to tell you is going to make you keep it short. But keep it short. Tell me what you think about the shooting. Go ahead.
Well, what I think about the shooting is that the officer put himself in jeopardy. That's actually a crime. There's actually a couple cases where an officer was injured and then got arrested because he put himself in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at where that officer is situated, he's supposed to be 6 feet behind there. Every officer knows that. He's oriented to the front of the vehicle, which puts him in the line of her travel. Secondly, after he shot her the first time...
Before you...
Go ahead.
Before we could move past that, presuming that he didn't stand where he's supposed to stand by his training, how does that bear on the legal issue?
Well, that means that he placed himself in a situation that forced the lethal action.
Yeah, but that would not. I can prove to you in a common sense way why that wouldn't matter. Let's say he was standing in the wrong spot and she pulled out.
I'm telling you, police officers have been arrested for these types of situations.
I know that, but hear me out. It
does matter.
No, it doesn't. I'll tell you why. If she pulled out a gun and aimed it at him, or if she actually did hit the accelerator to the floor and aim right at him, you would not tell me he had to get hit or shot. You would never say, well, you're not standing in the right spot, so you take what you get. Obviously, he still has
an apples.
No, he always maintains the right to defend himself.
I don't want to argue about this.
No, but it's not. There's nothing to argue about. He always maintains the right to defend himself if he actually is threatened. Well, nobody ever has. Nobody ever has.
I'm telling you, there have been officers who've been arrested.
Yes, but those officers
been injured.
Vincent, those officers that were arrested were not defending themselves. Nobody.
What were the names?
There is no such thing in the law.
This is what you do, bro.
Vincent.
Listen,
there is no such thing.
Can I read something to you?
Sure.
Okay. So you said no cop has been arrested after they were injured.
No, I never said that. I never.
Okay, tell me exactly what you said.
I said that no policeman ever gives up the right to defend himself from someone who's using deadly force against him because he's standing in the wrong place.
Okay. Now, do you understand what that kind of crime is classified as?
No, because
when a cop, no,
I'll tell you why.
puts
Because
himself-
he could be
when a
guilty.
cop put-
He could be guilty of some crime that you're talking about, but that does not bear on whether he had the right to defend himself.
Do you know these statutes or not? Is what I'm asking you.
No, but I know the law. I went to a law school.
So, well, if you don't know the statute, you don't know the law. Listen, these guys, it's called an officer enforced fatality.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when the officer doesn't follow training, I'll give it to you. Ashton, here's the name. You can check it out yourself because I know you're a fat guy. Yeah. Ashton Barnes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Officer jumped onto the running board of a moving car. So he placed himself in that situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he shot the driver when he did not stop after he told him to stop. The court allowed for a broader look at the pre-shooting conduct. This set the stage for 2026, and he was charged and convicted. Okay, so you're
charged and convicted of what?
Oh, well, negligent homicide and manslaughter, because the prosecution argued that it was an officer enforced fatality because he did not follow proper procedure, which is exactly the case with this individual.
Right, but okay. We'll have to disagree.
So that's the case the state is going to make. Were you familiar with the Ashton Barnes case?
No, but Vincent, I'm going to tell you. Okay. I'm going to tell you that if the officer is not standing in the right spot, even presuming that in that chaos, he's supposed to stand 6 feet away.
The statute.
Vincent, please. Vincent, please. All right, we're gonna move on. Vincent, okay. you call next week. Who else, Liz?
Matthew is going to join us right now.
Real quick. Why does it take long to connect them?
They have
to join. The delay? Okay, Matthew, make it quick, and then I'm going to tell everybody all the answers. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. I called in literally just to hear you guru, for the rest of the show, so that works for me. But listen, I appreciate the perspective you guys are bringing here on this ICE enforcement thing. I do think that these protesters were directly positioning themselves in the middle of an ICE action, which I think is a little bit different than the example that was just given by your previous call-in. Because, there you're talking about direct enforcement action against a suspect.
Yes.
But I think maybe here you're talking about people who are deliberately positioning themselves in the middle of an active crime scene, using their vehicles to do so.
I mean, just say, Matthew, it doesn't matter because once one part, there's, you can be in many situations, including a pushing match or a fight. As soon as one person introduces deadly force into the mix, the other person has the right to defend themselves. This is kind of this is how, what was his name who got offered, George Zimmerman. He claimed that Trayvon Martin was trying to kill him and that he had to kill Trayvon Martin, and he won. Now, we all probably thought, what the hell is this guy getting into, bothering this guy, Trayvon Martin, for? And, why you go out there looking for trouble? There were a million things that we all thought about this guy, but at the point where he's at the point where you're actually threatened with your life.
Let me perforate this. Let me perforate this for a second if I can. Yeah. So I just think that granularly, you may have a point. If we're gonna put a microscope on this specific instance in which the guy was defending his own life, even if fine. But I don't think that really does credit to the argument, Noam, because it doesn't do credit to the real debate that we're having. Because what are we really talking about? We're talking about the largest shift of funding in law enforcement priority in the history of the country to a relatively new organization, ICE, right? And we're talking about a training period which is less than barbers get in California, which is less than So there is definitely a larger systemic problem that I think you need to speak to here, outside of this very granular question of whether or not this officer had a right to defend himself in a moment of poor judgment.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't know about that, not to my credit, but I don't know about it. I can't speak to it except to tell you that it sounds right to me what you're saying. I mean, yes, if these people are out there essentially engaging in the same activities with the same risks, with the same deadly weapons that the NYPD does, then you'd imagine they should have the NYPD level training, right? It seems pretty elementary to me.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty sort of like objective rendering. Do you have any real feelings about like
That wasn't good enough. I agree with you.
It's just, okay, I guess so. I guess so. I just,
No, so you know what? Let me tell you.
I want to feel a little bit. I want to hear you spit a little bit when you say it, and I'm just not getting that.
In that case, you have to talk about Israel and Gaza. No, I'm kidding. Let me tell you what my opinion is about the whole thing, and then because actually I probably agree with you more than you think. So I think that the watching all the videos and rewinding them and watching it from a different angle and rewinding it again and then making a list of all the details and all that stuff. Peril, can you sit down? Just leave it. My God. Yenta. And
Try.
Really, please. Watching all the videos and compiling this list of details. You see a new detail each time you see the video. This angle, the tires. This is all completely unfair to the defendant because the defendant had, a quarter of a second to make that decision, and the entire incident lasts a few seconds. And really, there's a part of me which says the only fair thing you could do in front of a jury is show the jury that one video that I showed at the end in full speed, show it to them once and only once, and say to the jury, okay, that's what he saw. You tell me whether he was in danger or not. And if you can't know, then therefore he couldn't have known. And so I think, and then, I just add to it that every year a certain number of policemen hesitate and are killed because they wanted to wait just to be sure before they were, reacted to what appeared to be a dangerous situation. And in all those incidents, or many of those incidents, if those policemen had reacted, many people would be calling them criminals. You didn't have to shoot that. And they'll never be able to prove, actually, no, I did. So from a criminal standpoint, beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't see how you can convict a person like this. And I'll add one more element to the criminal thing. This is a jury nullification-ish feeling that I have, which is that these people are hired to risk their lives. If they got bad training, that's not their fault. And they go into these deadly situations because they're ordered to. And apparently with this guy actually had been dragged and some, tens or hundreds of feet at some point earlier. And there is something in me which says, even though I already know that nobody should be convicted except beyond a reasonable doubt, it's very, very, very hard for me to prosecute a law enforcement officer without clear signs of his malice. I feel like we say, welcome, you're the next contestant on Get It Right or Die or go to jail. And instantly they're presented with something, and if they don't react properly in a quarter of a second, literally, even if they get it wrong, well, that's it. You're going to go to jail for the rest of your life now. So I have a lot.
Come to that.
I'm not finished. That's a criminal. The criminal case, I would say, I just don't see how anybody could say, no, we can put him in jail the rest of his life, and we know he deserves it. But the civil case, I think I'm on your side. Civil case, my argument is this. It's really not about the videos. The civil case is kind of, come on, dude. You know this type of woman, activist, protester. You know the kind of people who yell at the cops like that. She wasn't going to run you over. All you had to do was get out of the way. We've all been in situations where somebody irate or seen it, where somebody irate got behind the wheel of a car and drove away, and somebody near them had to jump out of it. What the fuck's the matter with you? You could have hit me, I really don't think that. I mean, that's how I think. Clearly, it's 51% that he indulged his anger, I don't know what was going on with him, but it's almost impossible for me to believe she really wanted to run him over. And it's almost impossible for me to believe that he believed she really wanted to run him over. But yet, as I said, for a criminal thing, in that quarter of a second, however he found himself in that situation, once the car made contact with him, he may have reacted and felt like, this may be the end. So the criminal, I say no. Civil, I say yes. And as far as the training, I say yes. What else do you want from me?
Yeah, well, I would say, this is going to be a referendum on the legitimacy of ICE itself. This is a huge case. It's going to be a referendum on the legitimacy, by the way, of protesting them as well. I don't share your optimism around the criminal conviction. I think it's very likely this is going to be a manslaughter case on the basis of your previous Collins testimony. I think it's very likely that it will be found that way. But here's my outro.
If you go to this is a problem. If you go to the Wikipedia page right now about this case, it has this like 2 paragraphs in the middle of it there, where it says the Washington Post looked at the videos and said this, and New York Times looked at the videos and said this. Like even all the mainstream media newspapers, they look at those videos and they can't decide what actually happened. That's by definition to me reasonable doubt. Like forget about what he saw. If the people seeing the videos rewind them over and over with all the modern technologies, they can't quite agree. It's like, okay, this is what it is. One of these football decisions where it goes up to the whatever you call it when they appeal it to the judges, and we watch the catch from every angle, and we have to decide whether it was a touchdown or not.
It's a margin call.
Yeah,
a margin call.
And that's what we have here. And those decisions, those decisions are never beyond a reasonable doubt. As a matter of fact, quite often we think that they got it wrong. And one thing is for sure, as we're all watching them, we don't really know what the judges often are going to decide because we just can't tell. And when you have a situation where you just can't tell, I know how angry you are at ICE and all this stuff, and I agree with all this stuff, but that's the way our system is designed. Better to let 100 guilty men go free than have one innocent person in jail. The system is designed, as they say, it's a feature, not a bug, to let guilty people go free. That is the system we set up. This guy may be guilty. Okay. He may be 75% likely guilty. But the system is not designed to convict people 75% likely guilty. It's designed to convict people 99.9% guilty. That's the system.
I understand. I know that is certainly the principle, the large principle of the system.
Well, do you believe in that system?
Of course I do, but my point is like we have to like look a little bit beyond that because the system upon which that principle is based is also one in which immigrants have functional borders that they can go through.
Well, so Matthew, if you go before the jury and say to the jury, well, we should go beyond the system here, the judge is gonna say, yeah, you can't.
Judge right now. I'm talking
no,
to you.
But it has to go to a courtroom. And what you're saying, I'm presuming you're making the argument to me. You're making the legal argument. Yeah, but we can't make.
I'm not a lawyer, though. You are, right? No. And then for some reason now you're doing a podcast because I guess we all have to pivot at some point.
No, Matthew. What I'm saying is that if we want to talk about the legal standard, I'm giving you the legal standard, and if you agree with that legal standard, then you should say, yeah, shit. I think this motherfucker's guilty, but I understand. I understand that's the system.
I'm attempting to introduce a larger conversation, which I can see as we're ending this one.
Go ahead. You got 2 more minutes. Go ahead. Introduce it. Go ahead.
Anyway, my conversation is like if we're talking about a functioning legal system, that has to be a legal system that includes a functional border. And if you're not disturbed by the fact that the border is entirely shut down, and that you now have a program with ICE that is essentially like generating very ill-trained people, and lots of them, the largest law enforcement agency it's the largest part of the largest umbrella of the largest law enforcement agency in the country under Homeland Security. It is the largest funded office. Okay, so and that's all of a sudden out of nowhere. If you don't find that alarming, if you can't be like a little alarmist on that point and see these people populating like our streets, I don't think that's an objective read on the greater politics here. Okay, and I think you're shying away from that a little bit, if I'm being honest. And then finally,
let me respond. I hear what you're saying, and I would have to ask you to breathe and understand that this particular officer has no say in everything that you're saying. As a matter of fact, he's a victim of it. Like I said earlier, it's not his fault he doesn't have the right training. It's not his fault ICE is a shit show. It's not his fault that everything you're saying and more may be true. He's a hapless individual who needs a gig. He gets hired. They give him a gun. They tell him to go do this shit, and this is what happens to him. And you know, dude, you have to separate.
You might do the same. You might make some criminal mistakes if you had 47 days worth of training before someone slapped a gun in your arm and said, like, get out on these streets.
Yes.
Like, I think, honestly, no, you could afford a little more alarm.
No, criminal means criminal, as I'm using it, means you have to have intention to commit a crime. But all right, we got to go.
Wait. Well, give me one last statement, okay?
Yeah, real quick.
I just want to say, okay, first of all, look, people said Seinfeld wasn't going to work because it was too Jewish, right? And every time I listen to Dan Natterman, I'm reminded of how little I spoke to my parents because I don't feel that internalized Jewish self-loathing. So I'm glad that he's gone, and I hope you guys do like move more towards.
He's not gone. Okay, Matthew, we got to go. Bye.
All right, bye.
The guest is here.
Who? The guest is here. All right, we had 5 minutes before the guest. What was another thing I wanted to talk about? I guess that's it.
Iran.
I got nothing to say about Iran. Not in 4.5 minutes.
I think what Matthew was asking, although I didn't like what he said about Dan, that's really rude.
Dan's not self-loathing. I mean, he's not self-loathing because he's Jewish.
First of all, I think it's really cowardly to talk shit about people when they're not here to defend themselves, number one. Number two, I think what Matthew was asking is, and maybe you do feel this way, maybe you don't, but to speak a little bit about what a shit show ICE is.
Listen, I have to be honest with everybody. This is not a good confession. I'm just not up on things like I used to be. There's certain things I assume, and then I kind of don't even read about it anymore. I assume that ICE is a shit show.
It certainly is.
I assume that basically every government organization, NYPD is probably by far the best of them. As you get to smaller and smaller towns, you know, organizations like ICE, which are on again, off again. Sometimes they spend years barely doing anything. You know, like their marching orders change. They're political pawns. They're, you know, I understand in his mind I didn't show enough intensity about it, but I really do agree with him. I just assume it's true.
Okay, fair enough.
And then, you know, I felt this way about Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd case, and everybody got very upset. You know, we did know that he had that knee on Floyd's neck, whatever you want to call it, because there was a picture in the manual that taught them that hold. And I could just never get out of my mind that if those jackasses in charge of the Minnesota Police Department hadn't taught him that hold, he wouldn't be going to jail for the rest of his life. And I understand at the height of all that BLM stuff, people got very upset if you said that, and they would want to infer from that, like, I'm soft on murder or black, you know, like racism, all this stuff. But it's not that at all. It's just that, you know, if you understand it's not a coincidence that he held this guy down this way in exactly the same way the manual shows them holding people down. And you imagine it's your son, Derek Chauvin, and you would say, listen, he only did that because you taught him that. You taught him that hold. And you can read in the manual, it talks about excited delirium and all the reasons. They're bullshit reasons, by the way. All the reasons why you should use that hold, because they can have superhuman strength and all this stuff, which we all know now is probably or mostly exaggerated bullshit. But this is the stuff his superiors fed him. This is the diet of his training. Then he went out there and he did what he was largely trained to do. And then this guy who was on, all these drugs may or may not have contributed to his dying. Then you have these contradictory medical examiner reports. The guy drops dead, and now this guy's in jail the rest of his life. And that's not an easy case for me. As awful as it is what happened to him, I've always felt like I don't know about that. You know, I think the state of Minnesota has an awful lot of blame for that. Anyway. Okay. Hello, sir. You want to introduce our guest?
Sure. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
You told me you were going to be in a garden wearing a T-shirt.
Yeah, the snow is coming down again. It just arrived. So it's on the way to New York, I think, but it's now reached a little west of Toronto.
Well, your bookshelf is beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
welcome Professor Robert Jan Van Pelt, principal expert on Nazi gas chambers in the David Irving trial.
And he has other...
Yes. Am I allowed to
yes,
to do
this
the
is
extent?
different than a tweet. Go ahead.
I guess it's an informal show, huh?
Professor Van Pelt is one of the world's leading experts on Auschwitz, an architectural historian who has taught at MIT and the University of Waterloo. He is best known for proving through buildings and blueprints the reality of the gas chambers and crematoria. His work has made him a central figure in the fight against Holocaust denial.
All right. Welcome, Professor Van Pelt.
So my students call me Robert Jan or RJ or whatever.
RJ,
so.
I like RJ. RJ. So before we begin, I sensed from what was coming back to me through Periel, and I don't blame you, that you're very worried that you're walking into a trap, an ambush, you're going to get caught up in some of these, what's going on in the world today. And boy, are you right. No.
Well, at least let the cheese be tasteful as I'm nibbling it.
No, you have nothing to fear. I actually really just want you on, almost more than any other guest I've ever had, for the dry information which you have in your head. I'll only set it up by saying, I'm sure you're aware, and I'll play a little video at the in your bald head, that obviously you might have thought that these issues were disposed of and put to bed, but they are arising again more than they ever have. And every day on Twitter, we're seeing one person or another, cast doubt on whether the Holocaust happened, and in particular, whether or not the gas chambers were real, people died at Auschwitz. I'm on the mailing list of this guy, Carl Radl, R-A-D-L, who is one of Daryl Cooper's most complimented sources. Daryl Cooper, the Tucker's favorite historian. And 1 out of every 5 emails I get from this guy is something about how Auschwitz is a myth and all a bunch of BS. So I'm just going to play a little video at top of like a few bits of what some people have said, and then I'll tell you exactly what I did. I took the Carl Radl emails I got, and then I also asked ChatGPT for what are all the most common claims of Holocaust deniers, but I focused on the gas chambers, and they suggested a bunch of topics to ask you about, and I'm just going to go through those greatest hits and ask you to just tell us, what really happened, because I think this is of vital importance. So go ahead, Steve, play that video. It's like 3 minutes long. It starts with Nick Fuentes.
Max says, if I take 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies and Cookie Monster has 15 ovens working 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years, how long does it take Cookie Monster to make 6 million batches of cookies? I don't know. That's a good question. It certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there. The math doesn't quite seem to add up there. I don't think you'd result in 6 million, maybe 200 to 300,000 cookies. And I think the Red Cookie Association said something like that, probably 200 to 300,000 cookies baked, probably. And in addition, in this hypothetical, I imagine...
By the way, I think that this whole cookies thing became a way of not getting tossed off YouTube and stuff, because you're not allowed to deny the Holocaust on YouTube. So the euphemism is cookies.
If you took aerial photographs over the kitchens, you would need to see certain smokestacks to release the smoke from baking the cookies. And the smokestacks would project certain shadows, but I guess they're not visible in the aerial photographs taken over the kitchens. Moreover, if you look at the soil texture, it's really not deep enough for mass cookie storage underground. And so there's a lot of things. In the cookie kitchen, they say that the ovens are wooden and they have windows on them and they're not totally secure. And the ovens that they use... They actually did sort of an ad hoc use of that particular kind of oven, even though they made a perfectly good design for ovens for a different purpose, for delousing. I mean, for something else. So none of it really adds up.
According to the evidence that I have seen, there was no gas chambers anywhere.
Why did Hitler want to gas the Jews?
He didn't. The gas chamber they show you in Auschwitz is as genuine as the fairy castle in Orlando, rather like Disneyland.
That's David Irving, by the way.
And Auschwitz has become the kingpin, the linchpin of the Holocaust industry.
Are Jewish grandmothers lying to their grandchildren when they talk about what happened in the camps?
I think so. There's a great tendency when you've been somewhere or you've been near somewhere that you embellish slightly. I think the Jews have to ask themselves the question, why is it that every time they've arrived as pitiful refugees in a country, after a few years, they have to move on? They don't seem to ask themselves that question. I know that I'm disliked as an historian. I know that I'm hated by some people, and I know the reason why, and I know what I could do to change it, instantly change my opinions. I'm not going to do it. They don't ask themselves what they could do to change the way that they are disliked.
You said more people died on the backseat of Edward Kennedy's car at Chappaquiddick than ever died in a gas chamber at Auschwitz. How is that not denying?
Oh, that's Max Blumenthal, of all people, interviewing him. Max Blumenthal is,
The right quotation, the actual quotation, more people died on the backseat of Edward Kennedy's car at Chappaquiddick, meaning the one woman, Mary Jo Kopechne, than ever died in that gas chamber at Auschwitz, meaning the one that's shown the tourists. And the Poles now admit, they put on the inscription outside, they admit that the building was built 3 years after World War II was over. It's a fake.
All right. Where's RJ? Oh, there he is. Are you good and angry now?
No, I mean, I'm a little sick, but
all right. Before we ask you,
I didn't know of the Fuentes stuff still, so that was new. But I mean, I've had a lot of opportunity to go through the dirty underwear of David Irving as a result of the trial I was involved in, and of course I got basically access to all of his correspondence as part of discovery of, when the two parties basically have to exchange evidence. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about what he said and why it's complete nonsense or where it comes from. You're in the interviewer's seat, so I'm ready for you. But
well, I have
certainly Nick Fuentes is all over the place. So he doesn't know the difference between a gas chamber and a crematorium oven, just to start with, or a mass grave for that matter.
Well, I have bullet points of all these claims I want to ask you about, but I'm totally happy to let you just speak at first. What's at the top of your mind about all this stuff and respond in any way you want?
No, the first thing that's on my mind is that, let's call it Holocaust denial has been around really. I mean, the kind of scientific version of Holocaust denial, that is Holocaust denial that invokes counter evidence that's based on the alleged cremation capacity of the ovens or the alleged gassing capacity of the gas chambers, where deniers produce alternative figures like Fuentes did with his argument about the amount of cookies you can bake in certain cookie ovens over 5 years. That has been basically around since the 1970s, the late 1970s. And that really there was kind of a two-pronged approach. There was a French kind of approach to that centered around a academic called Robert Jan, and an American one in which basically what they call a revisionist magazine that was a Holocaust denier magazine coming from California were central in that. What happened in the early 1990s, and these were all amateurs, none of these people who were involved in those arguments were trained historians. They were amateurs. They were people who came, one of them was actually an engineer from Northwestern University, Arthur Butts. He was probably the most educated person of all of these deniers, but most deniers were people who suddenly got interested in this topic, made themselves into, kind of overnight in some kind of, they became kind of amateur Sherlock Holmeses. They believed that they could find a single piece of evidence that contradicted the general story, and then they started basically writing things or lecturing about this. And in some way, this was a very marginal phenomenon. What happened in the late 1980s and early 1990s was that there basically for the first time people who had some knowledge of history started actually to drift into this, let's call it this cloud of nonsense. There was a professor at Princeton, Arno Meyer, who in a book, Why Did the Heavens Didn't Darken, posited a really wrong-headed idea, but he posited that basically the Jews who were murdered in the Second World War were a kind of byproduct of the war against the Soviet Union. He was partly right, but because the Holocaust really was triggered, the final kind of the murder of the 6 million was triggered by the invasion, the German invasion in the Soviet Union. But he completely dismissed the role of anti-Semitism, the role of a plan for a final solution of the so-called Jewish problem in Europe, and so on. By writing this book, I don't think it was a good book as far as the German or the Nazi hatred of communism was concerned, but he really in some way piggybacked a vision of the Holocaust on top of that wasn't really researched, but he had a certain authority. He was a professor at Princeton. And so this book was very problematic. Then there was a German historian who also said that basically, that Hitler was kind of imitating Stalin, that really the core of Nazism was anti-communism, and also suggesting really that, if Jews were killed, and he admitted that a lot of Jews were killed, that this was really a kind of byproduct of the Nazi war against the USSR. So then David Irving comes in the picture, and David Irving is not a trained historian, but he's a very popular writer of historical books. I mean, he had an enormous audience. Many people loved his books. He was being published by major publishers, also in the United States, like St. Martin's Press in New York.
Can I just ask one question there about David Irving? Because he speaks German, and he did go into the archives, and apparently he did find documents that other people didn't find. Yeah. Is it fair to say, even though he wasn't trained, he was operating with the skills of a historian, correct?
Yeah, he was very, very energetic. Mm-hmm. He knew German very well. He had worked in Germany as a laborer after high school, a private school in his case, but high school in a German steel factory. But he was basically, he loved Germany, and in some way he loved Hitler. He believed that he was going to be the historian who was going to in some way redeem the reputation of Hitler. Hitler himself had announced that ultimately there would be a British historian, and he had said it somewhere in 44, even early 45, that he knew, of course, that he was hated all over the world, that there would be a British historian that would basically clear his name. And Irving, for reasons that I don't really want to go to understand, even believed he was his historian. And so he wrote a number of books about all kind of aspects of the Second World War, not focusing on the Holocaust. We have to say that. He was talking about military operations, and then he wrote a great biography of Hitler as a war leader in the late 1970s. But what he did in this biography, the first edition of it, is that he said that the Holocaust happened behind the back of Hitler, that Hitler didn't want it, that Hitler, and I'm quoting him, probably not that precisely, but Hitler was the best friend the Jews had in the Third Reich.
I think I heard him say that Hitler was protective of the Jews. I think I heard him say that.
He was protective of the Jews, yeah. Yes, and that the bad apples in this one, the real anti-Semites, were most importantly Goebbels. Mm-hmm. The minister of propaganda, the ideologist, and then also Himmler. And that basically what happened was that the Holocaust, that is the murder of 6 million Jews, the genocide of 6 million Jews, started in the summer of 1941 in the occupied Soviet Union. And then basically it in some way went out of control. Because it started also to involve Jews in Poland and elsewhere, and that Hitler only discovered this in 1943. And that when Hitler discovered it, he was very sad about what had happened. But of course, the Jews by now were largely dead. And so he forgave Goebbels and Himmler. And in some way, now Germany had this, in Hitler's view, this burden of history to carry. This was originally Irving's view. So the Holocaust did happen, but Hitler didn't know about it. And in some way, this was part of the attempt to rehabilitate Hitler for the future. Yeah, that he would become again a kind of viable example of a great leader. And this was, of course, part of his self-imposed task to be that biographer who Hitler had announced in 1944, who would ultimately redeem his reputation. So what happens then in the 10 year that follows between 79 and 1989 is that you first of all have a number of historians who start to in some way reinterpret the role of the Holocaust in the Second World War. And I talked about Meyer and Nolte in Germany. And second of all, there is a trial, a couple of trials in Canada in which the government is prosecuting a Holocaust denier named Ernst Zundel. And Ernst Zundel is a German national living in Canada, and he is prosecuted under a very old law that the Canadian colonial government passed in the War of 1812 to basically deal with spies and rumors. And it is the law against spreading false news. The idea, of course, is that you Americans would cross our border to make us, I don't know, it must have been the 14th state at the time, and that Canadians who would basically lie about what was happening in the American advance could be prosecuted basically for lying about a war. This law was still on the books. And so when at a certain moment in the mid-1980s, Holocaust denial became in Canada a public issue, basically survivors urged the government to basically revive this law, or nobody had ever been prosecuted under this law for 160 years, and to use it against Ernst Zundel, the denier. And the government had a first trial, it failed, and then there was a second trial. And in this second trial, the defense team of Ernst Zundel had the brilliant idea to get expert witness evidence on the gas chambers. Now, the question is, who is an expert on gas chambers? I mean, on genocidal gas chambers. I mean, and they found an engineer in Boston or Malden, Massachusetts, named Fred Leuchter, who had created a company, a practice, that basically had to certify the safety of execution equipment used in the state prisons in the U.S. that basically where the death sentence was applied to people sentenced to death. And so the idea is that this equipment, it can be a lethal injection machine, it can be a gallows, it can be a gas chamber, in the case of Missouri and Nevada, that they are safe to operate for the prison personnel, and also that they will not torture the executee. And so he had created a practice around this, basically to certify these execution machines. And so he was an expert. And so the defense team of Zundel, led by this French academic Faurisson, who was a key Holocaust denier, decided that they would basically hire Leuchter, the expert on, in this case, also gassing, and send him to Auschwitz for a few days and ask him to take some samples of the, as they call, alleged gas chambers, and have them analyzed back in a forensic lab in the US, and that he would create a expert report in which he, as an expert, would be looking at the ruins of the gas chambers and crematoria in Auschwitz, and then he would give his expert opinion if indeed these gas chambers and ovens would have worked. And that's exactly what happened. He went to Auschwitz, paid for by the defense team. He came back, and basically he was only a few days in Auschwitz. He didn't consult the archives. He doesn't know anything about the eyewitness testimonies. He never looked at the eyewitness testimonies. He only looked at the ruins and came back and said, in his best engineering opinion, the gas chambers wouldn't have worked and the ovens wouldn't have incinerated the alleged number of corpses, which in some way is the argument that Fuentes was kind of referring to. And so what happened was that Irving was in that room. He was in the courtroom and saw this testimony. Because Irving had been also asked to testify on Zundel's behalf, because Zundel was a kind of he was a producer, he was an entrepreneur, and he was connected to all of the denial networks in North America, and basically he organized trips for Irving and was very important for Irving at this time to sell his books. He would come with a car full of books, he would speak at those evenings, he would get something of a fee, and he would sell 100 or 150 of his books. And that's how he was making his living. So Irving was in the room. He sees the testimony by Lorchter, and he thinks it's brilliant. He said, I never thought about this. I'm a historian. I've worked in the archives. I like evidence. I am, this is my field. And suddenly there is this engineer, and he goes to Auschwitz, and he says that with his engineer's eyes, he says it's impossible. This was always the argument of deniers. They don't actually deal with any of the evidence that basically shows that what's alleged to have happened actually happened, but they say it is physically impossible. Hence the evidence, we shouldn't even look at the other evidence because it's physically impossible.
Can I pause you there for 1 second? This is fascinating, and I'm so happy to meet you and have you on the show. So I'll make one little aside here because it won't be appropriate to wait till you're finished. This reminds me very much of Dr. Michael Baden, who is this pathologist for hire, medical examiner for hire, who's done many, many popular cases. And he was the guy who was hired by the OJ team. And he concluded that it was physically impossible for OJ to have killed Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman because of the shape of the wounds and the amount of time it would have taken, whatever it is. So this was a huge thing. He later concluded that Jeffrey Epstein had killed himself. But it's very analogous. You hire a guy and he goes in there, and I can see the merit in saying don't listen to the eyewitness, because you would tell the pathologist don't look at the newspapers, just tell us what you see. But they get it obviously and completely wrong, and yet this stays in the record, and it festers, and it becomes an argument for deniers. To this day, people will say OJ didn't do it, even though everybody knows OJ did it, right? Because of this one guy, Michael Baden, who had credentials. So anyway, go ahead. That's what it makes me think of.
Yeah. So I mean, it is, of course, if you don't. I mean, first of all, it's very difficult to prove a negative. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can basically say that an eyewitness and many SS people testified after the war that there had been gassing. They say I wasn't involved, but it happened. Even the commandant of Auschwitz gave an enormous amount of testimony about what happened there. But, it's very difficult to prove a negative. I mean, you can have an eyewitness testimony who says, I was at 200 meters from a crematorium. I see a group of people arriving at the building and nobody ever leaves it again. And then I see smoke. I mean, I'm just, but it's very difficult to say, to have an eyewitness who said, I've been outside of that crematorium standing there for 3 years, and I never saw any group of people arriving there. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not how eyewitness testimony works.
Right.
Yeah, eyewitness testimony is good in basically asserting the fact that something happened. It's very bad at actually asserting that something didn't happen, because it might have happened behind the back of the witness, right, or around the corner or whatever like that. So already the deniers are in a kind of difficult epistemological position. I mean, a position of making an argument because they try to prove a negative, that something didn't happen. So then they are immediately kind of thrown into the position that they must say, because they don't have eyewitnesses, I mean, they really can't exist, of that something didn't happen. They have to say it's impossible.
It couldn't have happened.
And so what happened with Irving, which is really very interesting, is not only was he very impressed by this testimony, but then he decides to become the publisher of the Lorchter report. He has a publishing house, and he becomes the publisher of it, and then he basically starts organizing tours in which he and Fred Leuchter are talking amongst denier circles, extreme right-wing circles in Europe. So he now starts to basically, the Leuchter report becomes part of his business plan. Yeah, he's making money with that. And now it's exactly the same time he writes a second edition. He revises his biography of Hitler as a war leader called Hitler's War. And in the second edition that appears in 1991, which is now a year after he basically became the publisher of the Leuchter report, all references to the Holocaust, all references to the final solution of the Jewish problem, to the murder of 6 million Jews, have disappeared. It's not anymore that it says that it had happened behind Hitler's back, but it says it didn't happen. I mean, it disappears. Yeah. So, and this is in the historiography of Holocaust denial a very important point, because until that moment, all the people who had made these arguments that the Holocaust didn't happen had been amateurs, had been people with no standing at all amongst, let's call it the educated public who knows something about the Second World War, people who buy books about the Second World War, who want to read about it, who want to keep informed. But Irving's, let's call it now conversion, if we call it, the conversion to hardcore Holocaust denial, not anymore the Holocaust happened, but Hitler didn't know about it. So let's call it still maybe a little bit of, quote unquote, collateral damage, or it was a private thing by Goebbels and Himmler. But the Holocaust now, the Holocaust, and it was, of course, a genocide because it was tightly connected to Hitler, to Berlin, to decisions of the Nazi government. Now the Holocaust completely disappears. It has now, in some way, it has been sanctioned. I mean, because now in the second edition of his biography appears, it has now been sanctioned by a person who has a reputation, maybe not amongst fellow historians, because they already knew that he was very sloppy and that he was very biased, that he didn't give fair representations of complex historical situations. But a person who had great impact on what the general public knows about the Second World War.
Is it also fair to add to this story that you're laying out that each successive generation, more and more removed from the Holocaust, becomes more and more impressionable and more persuadable about these things because it's not within their own memory. Like, you could convince me of a lot of things about the Civil War that you could never put past somebody who lived around the time of the Civil War, right? It's like, what do I know? And I believe it's sure they got it wrong. So he benefits from the fact that there's younger and younger people around, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't really believe that the distance in time makes that much of a difference. Yeah, okay. It has a big difference when we try to understand the texture of things. But when we talk about, the big questions. I mean, the big question was Caesar murdered on the Ides of March, on the 15th of March, and whatever, 33 BC. It happened over 2,000 years ago, but we pretty well know that happened that day.
Okay.
There are certain periods in history of which we have a great amount of detailed knowledge, because also we want to have that, because we consciously preserve that knowledge. But I don't want to, be on my own little hobby horse here, but...
No, I think I speak for the world. This is very fascinating. Please continue.
Okay, so I want to go back to this moment that Irving, as a person with a reputation to lose, joins this bandwagon and suddenly gives it credibility. And that's the moment that in some way Holocaust denial really becomes a problem, a problem in the public domain, because it is moved out of the margins of, crackpots, basically having all of these little theories, and now it has moved into the public sphere. And so it is at that moment that in some way people get really concerned about it, because it seems to be also because of these other historians who already are, a little bit giving, alternative explanations about why the Nazis killed Jews, and I talk about Meyer. There's now a sense that basically everything that right now the public is ready for a kind of an alternative and a completely wrong-headed and false reading of history to accept that. This then basically creates the book by Deborah Lipstadt, until recently the ambassador in the fight against anti-Semitism under the Biden administration, professor at Emory University. She writes about Holocaust denial. Originally, she was not going to include Irving, but Irving goes public, so to speak. He comes out as a Holocaust denier as she's writing the book, and she correctly identifies his conversion as a real problem because he has a reputation. And so what happens is that she writes her book, St. Martin's Press and other publishers drop basically contracts. They cancel contracts with him. He started to lose income, and now he has actually a case, basically a case against Penguin Books and Lipstadt, Penguin Books being the publisher of Lipstadt in England, to bring an action for libel, in which he can claim also damages because he's lost income. And he does that in England because in England the libel laws are different from the US. In England, when you get a case for libel against you, you're the defendant. You have to prove that you did not libel the plaintiff. You have to make clear to the court that basically you told the truth. And so the burden of proof in the US is on the plaintiff. In England, it's on the defendant. And this is how I got involved, and I can go kind of, fast forward 5 years, and we can go deeper into the case. But what happens is this becomes a very public case because Irving is a very public person. He is the plaintiff and he loses the case. The defense team of Lipstadt, of which I was a part as an expert witness, basically is able to prove that indeed he's a Holocaust denier, he's a falsifier of history. They're overlapping kind of practices, but they're not completely identical, and that he is basically a neo-Nazi, and that he is an anti-Semite, in which the anti-Semitism piece is in some way the connection between the other things. Because when you want to say, why would anyone want to deny the Holocaust, mostly the motivation is an anti-Semitic one. That is, that Jews are, part of a big conspiracy, and part of this conspiracy is to convince the non-Jews that the Holocaust happened, which is a lie. And then the question is, why would Jewish conspiracy want to do that?
That's why I included at the end of that video montage Irving talking about the Jews. I felt that was necessary, a part of the story. So basically what, and then I will stop about the case. We come back about this conspiracy thing. What happened was that Irving was shown in this case. It was basically both the main trial and the appeal. Main trial in 2000 and the appeal in 2001. He was completely discredited. And this was the last time that a historian or a person who has a standing in the world of historians, some standing, who, has basically published a couple of bookshelves full of books about the Second World War. This is the last time that a person with that reputation basically, and who basically was defeated in a court in which all of the evidence was basically presented. And he tried to basically always question the evidence. He was not successful. And so he came out with his reputation as a historian in tatters. And since then, that's now 24 years, no other professional historian has ever joined basically this blogosphere of Holocaust deniers. I mean, I don't know really what Nick Fuentes is about, but we know he's not a professional historian. So what the Irving case did is that it stopped the drift of I would say a few amateur historians who had no expertise in the Holocaust itself. They had other expertises, but not in the Holocaust, who had started to say, maybe we
we should reinterpret the origins or the causes or whatever like that. That hasn't happened anymore. So when you are talking about whatever comes to you every day, in your email, for me, the key question would be, is there any kind of, professional historian who's sending you that kind of stuff? The related problem, of course, is that we live now in an age in which experts don't count anymore. I mean, this is, who cares about historians today? When you talk about the past, who cares about any expert? Who cares about any expert about vaccines, or for that matter?
Right.
We live in a historical moment in which the idea that the conversion of one expert to a completely untenable scientific or historical or scholarly position would actually matter. In some way, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, given who's running your right now health policy in the U.S., so in some way, I'm talking when I say, yeah, great that no historian has embraced Holocaust denial anymore after Irving, but in some way, does it still matter or not? I mean, probably not.
That's really the purpose here. I want to go. By the way, this is amazing. I don't know why I haven't seen you on interviews on television. Maybe that's just because I'm not watching, but you should be out there at this particular point in time and educating people. But I want to go through the list of, unless anything else you want to add to that, I want to go through the list. I want to go through the list of the claims, and you can give us, the answer, kind of like a hit list, so that people can be armed with the information that they need. As you say, people don't trust experts anymore. There are examples of experts not doing themselves justice, but in the end, it can't be a free-for-all. And anyway, so the first claim that we hear all the time is many deniers argue that Auschwitz gas chambers were merely delousing rooms. What's the answer to that charge?
Thank you, Prime Minister Netanyahu, on that one. No, I mean, this is a sick joke on my. So yes, so why? So let's just take two steps back.
Yeah.
What was the killing agent in the gas chambers in Auschwitz? It was a product called Zyklon B. Zyklon means cyclone in English. Zyklon B, which was a delousing agent. Zyklon B is a delousing agent that was commercially available. You needed a kind of permission for it, but it was developed in the First World War for delousing the clothing and textiles and mattresses of soldiers, but also for the killing of pests in silos, in grain silos. And the idea was that it was a cyanide product. It's liquid cyanide that basically is poured into some kind of gypsum-like kind of substance. You can put it in a tin. It has a shelf life. Closed it, sealed the tin, has a shelf life of 6 months. And then when you need to delouse something, you basically pack a room, anywhere where you are, especially when you're on the front in the field with the army. You basically try to find a room that's reasonably gas tight, but it doesn't need to be absolutely gas tight. You put all of the stuff that is full of lice and other kind of vermin in that room, especially soldiers' uniforms. Then you basically bring the tin in, you open the tin, you leave and you close the door and you seal the door and you come back 24 hours later. And the cyanide has degassed over that period, and not only all the insects are dead, but also the nits, the eggs, are destroyed. And that's very important in this thing. That's why you need a 24-hour kind of period for this gas to work. That's why Zyklon B was in Auschwitz, like it was in many other camps, like it was also in civilian operations. It was a normal product that was produced in factories. You needed to have a license to use it. Not everyone could just go to a shop to buy it. But a similar product is produced by DuPont. I mean, DuPont had in Delaware, had the U.S. license for a same product. So because Auschwitz was a big camp, it had a lot of delousing happening, and there were indeed delousing chambers, and they were called gaskammer, gas chambers. And so the buildings were designed for delousing purposes, with an unclean site on one side, and you can see them in Auschwitz at this time, and there's a clean site on the other side, and in between is a gas chamber. And you basically, the people who work in that building will take the clothing of prisoners or arriving deportees, put it in the gas chamber, put Zyklon B in, wait for 24 hours, and then it's moved into the clean site, and it can be reused, recycled, whatever like that. So this is the standard application of Zyklon B. However, in September 1941, 2 months after the beginning of the campaign against Russia, Operation Barbarossa, basically the headquarters of the SS concentration camps in Oranienburg, which is outside of Berlin, next to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, calls a meeting of the commandants of various concentration camps, Sachsenhausen, Dachau, Buchenwald, but also Auschwitz, and said, we are going to get involved in basically mass executions, mostly of Russian prisoners of war. Of course, they were considered to be communists. They were not protected by the Geneva Convention. And we need to have some new methods. We need to have some methods of mass execution. And so basically, the head of the concentration camp system gives the commandants a license to experiment. In Auschwitz, it happens to be that there is all of this quantity of Zyklon B, and the deputy commandant decides to do an experiment with this lethal gas by basically locking a number of sick prisoners into a basement, have someone come in with a gas mask, and then basically open this tin in there. I mean, the prisoners are behind basically a barred gate. They cannot interfere with the Zyklon B. They open the tin, he goes out and he closes the door, and they come back 24 hours later to see what happened, and everyone is dead. So they have now, basically what they're going to do is to say, okay, we have this way of killing many people at the same time. There were some 500 people were murdered in that single event. And it's actually very cheap. We already have the material because this is used for delousing purposes. And we're basically taking some of that product and are going to apply it for mass killing purposes. This is why Zyklon B becomes the preferred tool of murder in Auschwitz. It doesn't happen anywhere else.
Now let me just question you a little more closely. What is the evidence of this? Are there documents? Like, how do you know that what you've said is what happened?
No, it's a combination of things. It's first of all eyewitness testimony. Mm-hmm. So the testimony of the man who ordered, the people who did the gassing. So the commandant of Auschwitz, he testified after the war and he said, "This is what I did." We have testimony of other SS people who gave testimony immediately after war. We have testimony of prisoners. Then we have the kind of the permissions. When you need to get Zyklon B, you need to basically go to a factory and pick it up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you need to get a truck from the carpool of the camp. The truck basically needs to be released because it's wartime. Everything needs a permission. The car needs to get a release to go to the factory. Yeah, and then it drives back, and there needs to be a reason why this Zyklon is released, why it is picked up. A few tons of Zyklon.
So there's receipts and such of much more Zyklon going back and forth than would have needed.
And then it says, and then the text on top of it, and that was in Auschwitz a month ago in the archive to make a movie, and I went through these documents, a whole stack of them, and it says RE, the reason for this is the Judenumsiedlung.
Oh, okay. Yeah?
Which means the resettlement of Jews. Now, resettling where? Mm-hmm. Jews were arriving in Auschwitz, but they never left.
Right.
Yeah, very few left. We have 1.1 million Jews, 1.1 million Jews arriving, and we have, whatever, 100,000 leaving. So where are the other million people there? So that is the resettlement, quote unquote. And we have these documents that talk about the purchase of Zyklon B for resettlement. Now, you could argue against that of course the Jews came there and that all their clothing needed to be, deloused and so on. And the problem, if you really want to go very deeply forensic into this problem, is that in some way the amount of Zyklon that was used to murder Jews in Auschwitz, and of course also Roma Sinti people, was only a small percentage of the total amount of Zyklon that was used for delousing purposes. Yeah. It doesn't take much Zyklon to kill a human being. It takes a lot of Zyklon to basically kill insects. This is why lice will inherit the earth and after we've gone. But so it's difficult to put a statistical kind of final proof on this. But then we have, for example, and now we come into really interesting territory. Because now deniers are going to say, okay, and the thing gets a little complex here. So when we come into a delousing gas chamber in Auschwitz, then you see that the walls have blue stains on them. Yeah, and the blue stains, we've always known that the blue stains basically are the result of the impact of cyanide on iron. Yeah, there is iron in the wall. Yeah, the element iron, and that when cyanide basically binds with iron and creates a pigment, and the pigment is called Prussian blue. Yeah, it's a dark blue pigment, and so then you get the argument. Okay, we see these delousing chambers, and they have walls with blue stains. But now we go, and then they say the alleged homicidal gas chambers, and we don't see the blue pigment. Now, first of all, most of these gas chambers were destroyed by the SS in late 1944. There's only one that remains, and that is in that gas chamber that Irving referred to when he talked about more people died on the backseat of Senator Robert Kennedy's car in Chappaquiddick than in that gas chamber in Auschwitz. In fact, he misquotes himself there. But if you come into that gas chamber, first he says that it was built after the war, which is not true. It's a very complex history in which there is a crematorium that had a gas chamber that operated from 1941 up to 1940, late 42. But that gas chamber was then reused as a air raid shelter in 1944. It was rebuilt, and then it was reconstructed in 1947 in the state it had been in 1941. But they made a mistake. So yes, it's kind of a reconstruction of an original state. It's a little messy because originally the Polish, the Auschwitz Museum didn't say that, yes, we're in the right position, but there was a use separating the gas chamber use in 1941-42 from the museum kind of display in 1947, which was not gas chamber related. Yeah. But if you come in that room, there's no blue stains. And so then they say there's no blue stains. There could never have been any Zyklon in that room because the signature of Zyklon in a gas chamber is the formation of blue stains, and there are no blue stains. So then the question is, okay, why, what is an explanation for that? So they said impossible. There are no blue stains. Now, first of all, you can say that the wall could have been repainted. The buildings, the gas chambers elsewhere in Birkenau, basically they were destroyed. There's only some bricks there. You don't even know if these are the original bricks because in 45, 46, the Polish population around Auschwitz was recycling bricks for their own houses. Because they came back and nothing was left of their houses. But an important experiment was done by a forensic lab in Krakow in the 1990s, when Holocaust deniers really started to embrace this argument, no blue stain, no cyclone at all, where they basically did an experiment where they started to, in the lab, add a lot of carbon dioxide in the mix. Yeah, so we have cyanide plus carbon dioxide, and then basically to apply it to iron. Yeah, just to put it to a wall, to a coat of drywall, whatever like that, with iron in it, and the blue stains don't appear. Why not? Because the high concentration of carbon dioxide prevented the formation of ferrocyanide, which is the blue pigment. Now, I wasn't there. I wasn't in that lab. But this is a very reputable lab that basically said, and they created a report, an official report, that when the level of carbon dioxide in a room reaches a certain level, let's say whatever, 18% or something like that, the pigment will not form. And this, of course, is exactly the difference between a delousing gas chamber, where we have clothing with all kinds of insects, and the cyclone, the cyanide is applied to that. There is the normal level of carbon dioxide in this room. But when you pack in a gas chamber, let's say of 200 square meters, which was the size 2,000 square feet. If you pack 2,000 people there, I mean, people were packed in the gas chambers at a density of around 10 people, 1 person per square foot, which is basically a New York bus during rush hour, or it should at least be that density if public transport is used decently. Then basically people are packed, they're panicking, they start breathing very heavily, the carbon dioxide will rise very quickly. And that exactly creates the conditions in which the blue stain will not.
Did they put in that experiment the amount of CO2 that would be expected in a room of that size with that number of people in it? That was the.
So it was basically, again, to try to argue. Maybe we're always trying to deal with, in some way, proven absence. Why is it that there would be no blue stains there? So this was also an argument that I presented in my report. I'm not a chemist, but as a historian, I basically said, as a historian, I'm looking at all kinds of historical evidence, and I'm looking at this too. This was actually appealed. My role in this whole trial, I was the expert on Auschwitz. It was important because Auschwitz was the center of the case, because Irving had converted to Holocaust denial on the basis of a forensic report on Auschwitz by Mr. Leuchter, because it was the pivot in his history as a denier. In some way, the Auschwitz part became a pivot in the defense for Lipstadt and Penguin Books. And so I used all kinds of arguments that I had picked up as a historian, inclusive these chemical arguments. And so then after Irving had lost his case, he basically said that I, Robert Jan Van Pelt, should never have testified on this because I'm not a licensed chemist. Yeah. And I'm not. I never claimed that. I'm also not an architect. I'm a professor of architecture, but I'm not an architect. I'm a historian by training.
We're going to run out of time soon. I want to get to the architecture. No holes in the roof, no flues. I don't know what the argument is. What's the argument made about the fact that there's no upward ventilation at Auschwitz? That meant there must have been no gas. What's that about?
Okay, how many more minutes do we have?
Well, we can go over. We're not. I don't want to keep you longer than we.
Okay, so let me try to explain what this is about. Yeah. So, crematoria. There are 4 crematoria in Auschwitz: 2 and 3, 4 and 5. 4 and 5 are above ground. Basically, they have above ground gas chambers. You can just, there are little portholes in the walls of the gas chambers. SS man goes on a little ladder, opens a porthole, basically empties a tin of Zyklon B into the room, closes it, and then let the Zyklon do its work. Crematoria 2 and 3 were not designed, or the design was not made with the idea there would be gas chambers in there. They had underground morgues. It makes sense to have an underground morgue because they're cooler. And the large underground morgues, they were designed really for, in epidemics, when you get suddenly a typhus epidemic, you get many corpses are being produced by this disease in a short period of time. You need to store the corpses because the ovens cannot deal with it all, in the next 24, 48 hours. So they had very large morgues. And so one of the morgues was converted into a gas chamber and the other one in an undressing room, both in crematorium 2 and 3, as they were being completed, as the buildings were completed in early 43. Now, the problem with, there's a number of problems when you have an underground gas chamber. The first one is how do you ventilate it after the gassing has taken place? You need to get a sophisticated ventilation system to take out the cyanide out of the room before you can re-enter it to take the corpses out. Yeah, so that's one problem. But there was another problem with these crematoria. The crematoria had these were very powerful crematoria. They had around 1,450 corpses per day capacity, each of them, number 2 and number 3, together around 3,000. And you already ask, why do you need that many ovens? Why do you need that cremation capacity when you can do a compare and contrast exercise to other concentration camps, where you can see that there is, typically per 10,000 inmates, you will have a capacity of maybe 1 or 2 or 5 corpses per day. But in Auschwitz, it was orders of magnitude larger. So the question, first of all, is why do you need that capacity? Which means that something different is happening there. That corpses are produced in a different frequency. There's a different capacity of corpse production, if we may call it like that, in Auschwitz. That means murder. But the big problem that they had in Auschwitz was that the Zyklon product was developed in the First World War for delousing. Delousing needs a 24-hour application of cyanide to the vermin that's going to be killed. That's part of the patent, that there will be a very slow degassing of the cyanide from the Zyklon material, from the gypsum material. So that was being produced for the camps. However, human beings, when you want to kill them with cyanide, you don't need much of it, and it goes very quickly. So you don't need a 24-hour period to basically to have that material degassing the cyanide. Within 15 minutes, if you have a certain dose, or maybe in a gas chamber in which 2,000 people have been locked in, you can probably use 2 kilo tins of cyanide. So that's 4 pounds of Zyklon B, and you introduce it, and everyone will be dead in 15 minutes. So the problem that the SS in Auschwitz faced was that they had now a killing agent, which they had taken off the shelf, which wasn't designed to murder human beings, but basically which was designed to kill lice and vermin, and which had this 24-hour period of degassing. And when you have transports arriving every 24 hours in the camp, which means that you have only 24 hours between the arrival of a transport, selection, taking the people who are selected to be murdered to the undressing room, having them undress, then kill them, and then incinerate their bodies before the next transport arrives within 24 hours. You cannot afford to have that lag of 23 hours and, 23 and a half hours. That extra time that basically the killing agent demands because it degasses so slowly. You need to be able to remove the Zyklon from the room immediately after everyone has died, which means immediately 15 minutes after the Zyklon was introduced, you have to remove the Zyklon.
So how'd they do that?
How they do that? They created columns that went from the roof into the floor of this basement, in every basement, 4 of those columns. And the columns were made of wire mesh. They were basically two cages, a big cage and a small cage inside there. They were made of wire mesh, very strong wire mesh, yeah, with heavy corners. And inside the second column of wire mesh, there was basically like a little basket almost, and that basket could be pulled out of the inner column through a hole in the ceiling of the gas chamber, and there's something to close it on top, and the SS could stand on top of the roof, open the little kind of hatch, and then lower inside that second wire mesh column a basket with degassing zyklon.
Now what's the evidence that this existed? Is there receipts of inventory? How do we know that these existed?
We have inventory of it. We don't have the original blueprints because these were modifications made after the blueprints were made. But we have inventory in which they are mentioned. That means after the completion, we have basically testimony of the man who made these things. He was a prisoner in the camp workshop. And we have eyewitness testimony of both Germans and also of Sonderkommando. That means slave workers.
This is interesting because, tell me if I'm wrong, you have testimony of a prisoner who said he made these wire mesh shafts or whatever they are. But he
Michael
would...
Kula, yes.
I'm sorry?
And his name is Michael Kula.
He wouldn't have, I presume, the expertise to know he should make something up like a wire mesh shaft in order to explain this problem, right? In other words, it's not just eyewitness testimony, but his testimony which would make no sense unless he had scientific expertise to have.
He was a blacksmith. He was a blacksmith. There were many workshops in the camp, and there were Polish tradesmen at work in these things, and these were made in the camp. Yeah. So we have his testimony. We have drawings. So we have drawings by a man called David Irving, who was a Sonderkommando, a slave worker, Jewish slave worker in crematorium number 3. He was a trained artist, worked in Paris before the war. We created posters and so on. And he immediately, upon the return to Paris, he survived the Holocaust. Upon the return to Paris, he started to draw what he had seen.
I see.
And he draws very detailed drawings of, for example, a section of the crematorium number 3, inclusive the basement, and he draws those columns and he indicates them as basically the columns through which the gas arrives. He didn't really know why they used the golem, because the golem wasn't the introduction device for the gas. Yes, they were introduced there, but the most important function of them was to basically allow the SS to pull out the still degassing zyklon after 15 minutes without the victims having interfered with it, because otherwise it would be spilt over the bodies and over the floor, and they had to wait another 23 hours before the degassing stopped.
The last, there's many, but the last claim I hear the most often, I think you already alluded to it right at the very top of your presentation, is about the doors being wooden and therefore not airtight or sealed enough to gas people to death. At the beginning, you said it actually doesn't have to be that tight, but I'll let you answer. This is
I mean they were tight. There were seals. There were seals in it. I mean, a door like that is in the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. Gas doors are basically normal. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were in these delousing rooms also. Yeah, they have gas-tight doors now. This idea is, if they're, in some way, and we can go back to Dupont, Dupont has used this cyclone material in an American version of it. And one of the things that you need to start to consult when you try to understand how this works is to go into the safety instructions of the commercial product, because of course it comes with a lot of safety instructions. And what is very clear is that this particular cyanide product actually is, it's not that you just have, you breathe it in for 1 second, when something escapes you drop dead. It needs to actually reach a certain relatively high threshold before it really becomes dangerous. So it's certainly not that people were on the other side of the door, standing there, with their face, basically on top of the seal. Yeah, some cyanide probably might have leaked through some of these doors at some of the time, but that would not have created a situation that was particularly dangerous. And in any way, they were prisoners.
It would not have created a situation that was dangerous on that side of the door, nor would it have prevented people on the other side of the door from dying.
Yeah. So the door argument is silly. Now there are, of course, then when we come into really, we can go into all of the arguments about the doors where the deniers say, these should have been metal doors because, you have gas-tight metal doors which are used for air raid shelters and so on. I mean, whatever the evidence is that this happened, which is a convergence of eyewitness testimony, material evidence, documentary evidence, etc., etc., etc. They always try to find something that might just be that tiny little piece of dust on Dr. Watson's shoe that allows basically Sherlock Holmes to reconstruct, that he was in Pakistan or in British India, as an army doctor. I mean, they always believe that they can find that tiny little bit of evidence that basically throws all of the historical evidence into disarray. So, that's their method. They don't produce, and I just want to weigh one. And if I can just have another 10 seconds.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
See, as a historian, as a lawyer, you need to have a theory of the case. Yeah, you need to basically, as a historian, when you look at evidence, at a certain moment, you need to create a narrative that explains all of the evidence that you're looking at. You try to create a story out of it. Yeah, a story that is a credible story on the basis of the evidence that you have, using also your reason and whatever, and allowing for contingency and so on. The big problem with deniers is that while they're continuously shooting little darts at the, let's call it the official narrative, as they call it, they've never been able to actually produce an alternative story, an alternative narrative that actually explains everything that's there.
Yeah.
You cannot, as a historian, you have a task, both to say, this didn't happen, and that might not have happened. I'm looking at evidence, and I'm able to reconstruct a series of events that make sense, that basically allow me to understand this particular period in history and this particular kind of historical, these events as they basically interrelate with each other. That's what the historian does. They have never done that.
Yeah, well,
they've never been able to create an alternative reading for the evidence that actually makes any sense.
As I understand it, and it's the most simple one, but one of the facts that's really stumped them, and I even read some Holocaust denier who, changed his ways because of this particular fact. Nobody can explain, okay, where'd all the Jews go? This is literally, and I think Irving said, well, some of them took on aliases and went to Israel or whatever. Of
course, it's always the Soviet Union is basically used as, if you want to explain, Irving, when we talk about numbers, the 6 million, and Hilberg, a very credible historian, said it was 5.1 million. But, what deniers try to do is basically reduce the number of Jewish victims to, let's say, under 2 million, and then say they are really just victims of the war, like civilians were victims of the war.
And also to increase the casualties of Dresden as a way of kind of
exactly. Yeah. You go from 37,000 casualties to 370 or 500,000.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's always. I mean, Jews fled to the Soviet occupied part of Poland in late 39, early 40s. Many of these Jews ended up in the Gulag. Yeah, and that's actually where they survived, strangely enough. And then in 1942, when Soviet Union was now a ally of Poland, as part of the allies of the Polish government in exile, they were released and survived in the Soviet Union, and then came back in 1945, and then mostly went to the American zone in Germany. But the one of the things that deniers will do, they say that if you want to understand where those over 2 million, 2.8 million Polish Jews went, they all say, they all went to the Soviet Union and they died in the Gulag. So it doesn't mean then that they didn't die, but at least the Germans are not to blame for that.
Yeah, this is how they can't really explain that. All right, sir, in my opinion, we're living in a kind of worldwide David Irving trial time. Everything we're talking about now is being questioned by a whole generation of kids who don't know anything. And to the extent that you could put up a website or do short videos, of course, we're also living in the world where, TLDR, TLDR means? You don't know, too long, didn't read. Like nobody wants to read anything more than a couple of lines. But it's some sort of bite-size videos or a web page to respond to these arguments. I think you'd be doing a real service, because there really isn't much information out there, and you truly are an expert. Before you go, and by the way, if I have any resources that I could help, you have a university there, but any resource that I could help you technically, financially, anything to make that happen, I'd be happy to do that.
I have one thing, and it's actually in storage right now, but I created an exhibition called The Evidence Room with two of my colleagues, and it's actually there's the Evidence Room Foundation. It's based in New York. Everything is based in Delaware, of course, but the person who runs it is in New York. And the Evidence Room deals with this. It actually is a reconstruction of this gas column in it. We created it, and so check it out, and it might be of interest.
Yes, send Periel the link afterwards so we can make sure to include it with the show notes as well. Yeah. But you said one thing there. You alluded to something that Prime Minister Netanyahu would put his foot in his mouth. It was something, but I can't help it. I haven't been able to think about anything else since you let it slip. So tell it before you go.
I think I meant to do that. So what happened was that in 2008 or something like that, I was asked to authenticate a set of around 80 blueprints that were found somewhere in Berlin. They had been bought by a German newspaper in Berlin, and they were included also blueprints about buildings in Auschwitz, inclusive crematorium 2, and a delousing building that basically has in the plan the word gas chamber, sitting in a delousing gas chamber. And so I authenticated them, went to Berlin, authenticated them, and they asked me where they should go. I said there are only really two places where they can be at home. It can be either the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum or Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. So they went to Yad Vashem. And so then Netanyahu, who at that time was also prime minister, he picked up at some very public event, he picked up the plan of the delousing building, not of the crematorium where the gastings had taken place, because the room in the crematorium that became the gas chamber was not labeled as a gas chamber. It wasn't labeled without anything, no word there. But he took the delousing building and then basically held it up, so to speak, and he said, there's the word gas chamber. This is where our people was murdered. And of course, that was total nonsense. But it continues, because I was just at the Museum of Human Rights in Winnipeg, a great museum and things like that. But they have a facsimile of that drawing, and they made the same mistake. So
okay.
Life is a little too short for me to try to track them all down. I need a successor. Find me a young. I have one young man in Ireland who wants to do all of this. So I think maybe we should get him to create a website.
All right, so I'm very, very happy to meet you and have met you. I don't know if anybody else here has any quick questions. I'm not, this is live and we have some. I'm not going to expose you to any phone calls, even if you had time to stay, because I don't trust what's out there. But after we let you go, I will allow a few people to call and make some comments. And Liz, we might have to disconnect people. I don't know who's watching. Maybe it'll be fine. But anyway,
I will. I think it is time for a drink with my wife.
Yes, please do it. RJ, I can call you RJ.
Yeah, you can.
It's very nice to meet you. I don't know if you ever get to New York.
We will have to wait a little, I fear, but when it's safe for Canadians to come back.
They're mowing them down in the streets here. No, it's safe to come to New York. But when you do get to New York, we'd love to host you and your wife and your family, whoever it is, at the Comedy Cellar. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Give that man a drink. All right. I don't know if we have any. Is anybody still there to want to call in, Liz?
Yeah, Luke is here. We're asking Luke to unmute now. He's been around for the whole show.
Okay. All right.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Luke. Hi, Luke.
Hi. So I initially called in about the first topic, and because I like hearing my voice on the air, I stayed for the second one. So you can choose which you want to hear my thoughts on.
Give us the bullet point headline of each comment, and then I'll tell you which one sounds more interesting.
Love it. I think what's happening with ICE that I haven't heard talked about much is that they, in the videos I see, they tend to vacillate between we follow rules and we want you to abide by the rules.
Okay, that's a good bullet point. What's the next one?
Next one is the study of conspiracy theory and how it relates to the David Irving stuff.
I'm going to let Liz choose.
I'm going to let the chat choose, and the chat really has been talking about the ICE incident. So let's talk about that.
Okay, Luke, go ahead.
Okay. So you see...
Wait, just before I'm sorry, Luke, just hold. Sure. Just, you know what? Forget about Luke. No, I'm kidding. But Liz, just in the chat, are there any like Holocaust deniers there or...
No, everyone was really quiet and listening.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Luke.
I'm honored. So we see these videos, and there was one that came out the other day where an ICE officer goes up to a guy at a gas station who's protesting, kind of shoves him, and then when the guy bats his hand away, boom, they pile on, they arrest him. There seems to be this desire on their part, and frankly, I've seen this in regular cops as well, but it feels much more impactful because these guys are federal and they're flooding cities where they don't live, that sometimes they act like dudes on the street who are getting into spats with people, and then when stuff gets hot enough, they become, we are very official law enforcement officers, and that feels exactly like what happened in the shooting, where there seemed to be a lot of kind of shit talk with this lady, and he's filming her with his phone, and he explicitly breaks a rule. I listened to an interview with the chief of police in Minneapolis who said it is absolutely against the rules to stand in front of a car. That might be something you were doing in a road rage incident, but you don't do it when you're enforcing the law. And then as soon as things turn, now he's a highly trained official who has split second to make a decision. But where was that highly trained, I am a representative of the federal government attitude when he was just standing in front of the car, kind of just getting into shit with this lady? So I feel like we can't just start the conversation at the moment everything goes catastrophically wrong. We have to look at the attitudes of the ICE agents and the way they are behaving in almost normal interaction with people where they...
Yeah, the problem is that you can't bring the overall to bear on a criminal defendant, right?
Agreed.
Yeah,
and can I just clarify one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I'm actually not even talking about. I have no idea whether he's going to be convicted of anything. I find the conversation of people who are not witness to a trial deciding what's going to happen in the trial very silly.
I read you. I'm just making. I think we're on the same wavelength. Sure. As far as I don't. Again, I should know more than I do, but they're just a common sense basis. The cops walk around looking to stop trouble and crimes that are obvious. The ICE agents, like if you're an illegal immigrant walking down the street, there's no probable cause there. You're just a dude walking down the street, right? So something about their mission is to try to ferret out normal, everyday, law-abiding people who are not here legally. And this is a mission which is obviously going to lead to much more difficult interactions and look much worse, because it's one thing when you see the cops descend on some guy who's causing trouble or, in a fight or refusing to pay or passing, whatever it is. But it's another thing when you see, it's just very painful to see, like we're not good. It's like the sight of blood. For whatever reason, the blood is being shed, even if it's to save somebody's life. It's difficult to look at. To see an innocent person minding his own business besieged by the cops and then hauled off is very, very difficult to look at. And I don't envy these ICE agents their mission, the things that they're ordered to do, even if they did it with 100% professionalism. Even if they did that, I'm sure it would lead to all sorts of difficult interactions and things that we just have trouble approving of, because if we do oppose illegal immigration, we oppose it in an objective way. We all understand we can't just have everybody who wants to be in America come to America. We all kind of understand that. And yet, on an individual basis, we know these people. They work in our restaurants. There are our nannies. There are neighbors, and immediately once you know them, it's impossible to view them as threats to society. It's just not humanly possible. Even among the fucking ICE agents, I'm sure they have illegal immigrant friends, right? So this is it's a conundrum, yeah.
So what other crimes would we you said something, this impossible situation that the ICE agents are in where they're trying to ferret out who's legal and who's illegal.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't allow that to happen for any other crime, no matter how severe. We wouldn't say, hey, we're so interested in getting murderers off the street that we're going to send people out to look around and see who looks like they might be a murderer, and then talk to them and interrogate them and ask them to prove that they're not a murderer, or we drag them away. There's no other crime where we would accept that behavior from law enforcement.
Well, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm sure it's been adjudicated in some way. The question is whether an illegal immigrant does he have 100% of the same constitutional rights
that would apply if they're murderers as well. So
an American citizen, you have to have probable cause. You can't.
If I may,
yeah.
You are saying that because the crime that they are being suspected of might put them outside of the requirement for due process, we no longer have to give the assumption of due process, which you could just as easily say, we don't know that this guy we suspect of murder is an American citizen, so we don't have to give him the presumption of due process.
I don't want to commit to anything here because I don't really know. I don't really know the facts. I'm sure there are regulations, and I'm sure they've been adjudicated and they pass constitutional muster. I don't know that they're able. I don't know that they're able to just go up to anybody walking down the street and arrest them and question them. I don't know if they can do that. They probably have to have some reasonable suspicion that somebody is illegal.
Is accent enough? Because there was a video that just came out today of a Somali.
No, they probably break the rules like all cops do. But listen, I think I'm speaking from a humane point of view, but nevertheless, one always, to be credible, in my opinion, one always has to have an answer to the practical question. In other words, whatever you want to say about it, it's much more convincing if you can say, and by the way, we could actually solve this problem this way, and we'd never have to break any rules, and we'd never have to do these things, and here it is. The problem is, if you can't give that solution, then, then I'm a little paralyzed by it, because we do recognize in some way we have to be able to, we cannot have a rule which says anyone who gets here can stay. Come here as a tourist, and once you leave the gate, that's it. So it's a very tough problem,
You can't think of a better way to approach it than the way we're approaching it?
No, I'm sure I could think of it.
You can come up with one in 2 seconds.
I'm sure I could think of improvements. I don't know that I could solve the problem. Maybe I could. I don't think I could.
You're making perfect the enemy of the good.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that in the end, I hedge, because as much as I agree with all the criticisms, I'm just always uncomfortable unless I also know the alternative. That's just all I'm saying. Like I don't know how ICE works properly and effectively. Or you can say, Luke, I don't think they should. I think that we're better off just letting people stay. Which
is not my stance at all.
Yeah. But I'm saying and some people do say that.
Sure.
And
not me.
And obviously, we do need the immigrants. Like this is a big lie. I mean, Liz and I are doing construction now, and everybody doing these jobs are immigrants. I presume they're legal. I hire a contractor, but whether they're legal or they're illegal, and sometimes illegal immigrants give their employers documents that look legal. I've had that happen to me a number of times, and years later we find out, and they have to pay withholding taxes and all that. Years later we find out they weren't actually legal. But legal or illegal, the notion that we wouldn't grind to a halt as a nation if these people just went poof and went back to where they came from, it's absurd. It's fucking absurd. No one is going to do it. No one's qualified to do these jobs. No one wants to do them. We don't have enough people. We saw during COVID when there was a labor shortage, we kind of ground to a halt then, and wages went through the roof. So, both sides, and that's my argument to the other side along the same lines. Like, okay, dude, I get you. But what's your alternative to immigrants? You follow? Like, okay, now you're going to have your way and all the immigrants are gone. And now what? So I'm an equal opportunity disher outer of this argument, because the practical is the most important. Our biggest moral duty is to the practical. Otherwise, it's just jerking off. Excuse me. It has to be practical. It has to be practical.
The chief of police in Minneapolis, another thing that he said was that ICE has a habit of pulling people out of their cars and then just leaving the cars in the street, sometimes in drive without an emergency brake on. They leave dogs in the cars. Yeah. And that's just one little example of, you talk about the practical. Is this practically improving anything?
No,
is
of course not.
Getting better because of this?
This whole ICE outfit sounds to me like they've just been like, the firemen just sit around now. That there's so many fireproof materials and sprinklers that like the firemen barely fight fires anymore. I just imagine a bunch of firemen haven't fought a fire in 2 years, and all of a sudden, come on, you got to go fight. And they have no fucking idea what they're doing anymore. They've all gotten fat. I feel like ICE has just gone from the Biden administration, where they did nothing for years and years and years, and now they're put into the big game, and everything everybody says about them is true. They're untrained. You can make the list. They're not ready for prime time. They're just not. And Trump is not the type of guy to sweat details, right? Yeah. All right. Luke, thank you very much for calling. Anybody else,
welcome.
Liz?
We have a couple more. The
All right.
next guest, I don't have a name.
Should we take him?
Yeah, let's take this other guy, because this other person, they've been here for a long time as well.
Okay. All right. Alex texted, I think he was late, Liz.
Yeah, he was late.
All right. Okay. Let's check his papers.
He was on the train with Daniel.
Is he legal? Who are we waiting for?
We were waiting for this caller on his Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G from 2023 to unmute himself.
Come on.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I didn't hear her tell me to mute me. Sorry. I just wanted to thank you for doing this whole interview. I actually wrote up to you yesterday about this week's crazy theory about a Zionist land grab in Argentina. I don't know if you
Oh
saw
yeah,
that.
I saw that. Yeah.
And
Iran.
think
Candace Owens says we want to grab land in Iran too. Go ahead.
yeah, I can't keep up with it. Sorry. So anyway, I think it's very important for you to keep doing interviews like this. I know you had that discussion with Natterman, was it last week, about what to do with the show? And I just have to tell you, like, I've been waiting for somebody. I don't really agree with you on probably over half of the things you say, but I think there's definitely needs to be a show that is about going back to empirical proof. I'm writing a book now about 9/11 truth myths, and especially the dancing Israelis. And I've been, trying to find people that agree with this approach. And I think, the nature of this show, where you bring on people like Dr. Van Pelt, is exactly what we need. So I just wanted to tell you to keep it going.
Thank you very much. There is that one guy, an Israeli guy, who went on a talk show in Israel, and he said something, but then it was mistranslated actually in the way it goes around, and then it's impossible to find the actual show.
Yeah, I have relatives in Israel and friends, and I've tried to get the undubbed version of it, and nobody, it belongs to Channel 1, which is a state authority, and apparently getting anything from them is like pulling teeth, because I think they're very insecure about selling the rights to anything. I'm not exactly sure why it's so hard to get any archived footage, but I can tell you.
Track the guy down. Can't you track that guy down? What did he say exactly? Do you remember?
Oh, you're talking about when he says that our purpose was to document the event.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's what I was. But documenting could just mean I'm recording it. Like they made it sound like documenting, like for higher ups or something. But
so listen. Yeah. So I think about the same week that he was interviewed by Yair Lapid, which is that interview.
Oh right, yeah.
He was interviewed by a local newspaper in Jerusalem called Makor Rishon. And he also used the same phrase, but the full phrase that he used with them was, "We were there to document it just like anyone else on that day." And so when you think about it that way, on 9/11, everybody took out any camera that they had and took a memento. In fact, they had a film camera, so it wouldn't have had any intelligence value. I know you've dug into a little bit of the Ryan Dawson nonsense regarding Daryl Cooper. So he's had this hilarious theory that they actually tampered with the film while they were getting arrested, which if you're old enough to have used film cameras, it's so absurd that it's clear that he knows his audience is too ignorant to.
Well, this is the problem with all these guys, is that they're all so fucking crazy. That the notion that one might put any stock in anything they say, like Candace Owens just went on this whole riff about her dreams and behind a door, and Charlie told her this, and she's telling her audience as if like this is something serious, and the same thing with this 9/11. It's implausible to me that this Israeli guy.
It's implausible. It's implausible, but think about it.
No, it's implausible to me that he would, on a talk show in a casual way, just say, just drop, the whole mission. Like, oh, yeah, we were there to document. Like, it had nothing to do with the conversation. Nobody reacted. Right. Like, nobody said, what? So nobody who listened to him took it that way. And
but when you twist things for social media, and when you clip stuff, and take it out of context, that's the phrase everybody uses.
Yeah.
So. For people who didn't live through 9/11 and people who don't know anything about, reading NIST reports about Building 7 and how all the other buildings besides Building 7 that were in the vicinity fell, they don't really go below the surface, because it is really something that they pick up off of memes.
Well, so that when this RJ, Professor Van Pelt, I made this point to him. I don't know if you heard of that. That as each succeeding generation, it's easier and easier for them to just not believe something. Right. He didn't agree with me, and he said, "Well, yeah, but we know that Caesar was killed on the Ides of March," and I'm thinking you could totally tell me that never happened, and I would not spend a lot of time thinking, "What are you talking about?" Of course, but if I lived, at that time, of course I would know in a different way with a different amount of assurance. What are you talking about? Of course, everybody knows Caesar was killed on the Ides of March, right? So that I disagree with him on that. I think absolutely. Anybody who
I don't think he's looking at it. He's looking at it as an academic, and I think he has to realize that. Yeah. Like you said, the whole TLDR thing. I know people who they don't believe in these conspiracy theories, but they believe in the chemtrails. They believe in the other things, and they're always sending me stuff. And it's just a matter of people desire to fill in the gaps of what doesn't make sense to them in life, and you had that disagreement with
Luke, I'm your father. Luke, I have to go.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I don't know if we got one other person or not, but we got to wrap it up.
All right.
Liz, thank you, Luke. Call again. Is that it, Liz?
We have one more caller.
Okay. I hope it's Kevin Brennan.
I don't think so. It's Matt.
Oh,
Matt's
Matthew.
joining us now.
Matthew, yeah. Right, Matthew?
It might be a different Matthew.
Different Matthew? Okay. Have I said this before? I was like 35 years old before I actually realized that Matthew was with two T's. I just always assumed Matthew, like Matthew, not Matthew. Anyway, hello, Matthew. Hi, Matthew.
I'm a huge fan. This is so cool.
Oh, what's up?
I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Periel and Dan, too.
Yeah, they're both gone. Periel left because she had something better to do, and Dan didn't even come.
Okay, well, it's just me and you. Yeah. This is intimate. Nice. And the rest of YouTube. So I have three things that I'd like to bounce off you really quickly.
All right, do them in order of importance in case we can't get all through all three. Go ahead.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I wasn't here for the first part about Iran or ICE, but I watched the second thing with the Holocaust expert.
Yeah.
I'm a Jewish kid from Toronto, so that's my relation to that. I guess maybe I'm not unbiased, but I thought he came off really good until he said it was unsafe for him to visit the United States.
Yeah,
I thought he was like he was very credible until then. Anyway,
I think he just meant whatever. Go ahead. He was just being facetious. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. I want to agree with what your take on the ICE thing was initially, which is I'm not sure what the alternative is. If you have federal law enforcement officers who are lawful and are, trying to operate in their jurisdiction, I'm not sure what the alternative is for there to be some possibility, other than for there to be some possibility that you're met with force when you try to intervene in their operation. Because I'm not sure who's to decide what law enforcement operation is, morally just. And
no question. It's illegal to interfere with their enforcement, and they can be met with reasonable force, but you can only be shot if the officer can only shoot if he's doing it to save his own life.
I think the assault with a motor vehicle is hard to dispute from the second video where the guy is clearly in front of it. The first video, made me think.
It is, but the problem is we all kind of feel like, dude, why don't you just take a step to your right? Like what like why? Like, did you really think this woman was going to run you over?
That. I think it's to shoot someone. The lady who I guess was her girlfriend,
wife, I think. Yeah.
Wife, yeah. At the beginning of the video says, "We don't change our plates. You have our plates." And so the idea that you're shooting someone as they're fleeing when you do have their plates, I think that was what really sat.
That's very smart. I didn't even think that's right. She was almost telegraphing, like, obviously we're leaving. You can come get us tomorrow.
It didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
I'm still so nervous, by the way.
No,
I watch you all the time.
Don't be nervous. There's nobody listening. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, no, you're listening. That's who cares about the 100, the mass. So
that's number one. Number two, because we got to get through it.
Yeah. So no, but just on that, I think I dissent when you said that, like, what happens to the economy if all of the immigrants just drop out and disappear magically. And first of all, I would say I don't think all the immigrants, that's not the intention of anyone. It's the illegal immigrants. And I think that even the illegal immigrants would be a small subset of those employed through, small businesses. Like I think it's a lot easier to employ someone who's
illegal immigrants are a huge part of the workforce here, I believe. Illegal immigrants or the children of illegal immigrants, you can't.
I don't run a business. You do, and so I'm going to defer to you.
I'm not giving away my business. I'm just saying, if you look around at all the people who are immigrants, obviously, it's very difficult to imagine they all applied and got here through visas. Like there's no process for this number of people to get actual visas.
No, I understand.
To work in America.
I've thought about and I've tried to immigrate, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And my background on this would be that, my grandfather brought the Libertarian Party to Ontario. Like, I'm a very libertarian. I'm not a strong borders guy, but I do think that something that I've failed to see anyone really articulate is that right now there's a clear constriction of enterprise through regulation and taxation and regulatory capture by larger businesses. And so what you're doing essentially by making it as easy as possible for labor to come in from anywhere, but not make use of that labor in novel and innovative, productive ways, is you're just devaluing any labor that exists at the lowest end.
Yes.
So I don't think that the argument wouldn't be necessarily to say that, well, we need these immigrants. The argument would be, because we don't actually need the immigrants right now. Most people, the labor force participation rate is like nothing. Most people don't work. It's sad.
Yeah, but most of the immigrants work.
Exactly. Most of the immigrants work. What we would need is like a productive economy that makes everyone competitive. Because right now, I do think there is something.
Let me turn over to my general manager for a second. Liz.
Oh no.
How would you rate? Like, let's say we had no more immigrants who wanted to work for us.
Oh.
And you had to hire like the everyday Joe off the street, some kid, the college age kid, whatever it is. How much work do you think they would do?
We would close the next day.
It is so hard to find. Listen, I can speak out of both sides of my mouth on this issue all day long, but it is important for everybody to understand these immigrants work wonderfully, and we are no longer raising children in America who want to work that way. When I was a kid, you saw white dudes being short order cooks, and old dudes were driving taxi cabs, whatever it is. I can't even get my kids to clean their room and take out the garbage. We need these people. They are fantastic. They are fucking fantastic.
Okay, well then this I can definitely speak to, because like I've tried to get a job, these kind of menial minimum wage jobs that you're describing, and I've applied to hundreds.
I would never hire you. You know why? I would assume
because I'm unshaven and I'm unkept.
No, and not even because. It's not even because I think you'd be crappy, which you would, because the first time you had to go shovel vomit for somebody that you'd be like, I'm out of here. But this is the thing. The reason I would never hire you, I would just assume you were an ex-con, because I would say, what the fuck does this nice looking young white man want a job in my kitchen for? He has to have a criminal record. I swear to God. That's what happened with me and Liz one time. Remember,
We
Liz?
digress.
And I was right.
Can I run my last thing by you?
Yeah.
I don't want to waste too much time.
Yeah.
So this is about Israel. Can I ask you something about Israel?
As long as it's pro-Israel, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it is. I have an interesting relationship. I've always been in the abstract very pro-Israel, and then I went on the March of the Living, and I came away.
I don't know what that is, the March of the Living.
It's an organized trip for kids to go through Poland for a week and go to all the concentration camps and learn about the history of Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And then they subsequently go to Israel. So it's a nice change up, and you get both sides of it. Anyway, I found I wasn't like diminished in my appreciation for Israel or anything, but I was just like, the people are very abrupt. It's a very specific way of living. You can't own land.
Why can't you own land?
It's all land lease. You can't have property.
In Israel?
But anyway,
no, people own their apartments and stuff. I inherited my grandmother's apartment. I mean, we sold it, but I inherited my grandmother's apartment.
I'm pretty sure it's not freehold property. The underlying property that the apartment is on is leased from the government.
I don't know what there may be some residual socialist structure under there. But,
yeah, exactly. Listen, that's exactly what I'm.
But it's
so
not.
Either
but
way.
it has no practical consequence. I mean, the apartment that my family inherited. Nobody even ever mentioned that fact to us in the entire proceeding, if it existed, and we were able to trade it.
That sense to me of there being an ingrained socialist fabric or constitution to Israel, I think is something enough. It's off-putting to me enough where I'm not necessarily. I'm not going to go live there unless I have to.
Well, that's a little nutty. But go ahead. Forgive me. Go ahead.
No, it's not nutty. It's just
if it has no practical consequence, it shouldn't matter to you. I'm sure you know this. But anyway, go ahead. So
you're right. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, initially I was very pro Israel's actions with Hamas in Gaza, and the longer it's gone on, and there's an interesting nexus between people like Tucker Carlson who attack Israel around the same time also started coming out vocally against what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In a similar kind of utilitarian calculus. But at the end of the day, the reason I'm starting to rethink this, and I haven't changed positions or anything. I'm just my attitude towards it is maybe
keep it tight. We're on television. Come on.
Sorry. There's a lot of people that have died, and I'm not sure there's any material change in the circumstance of Israel, right? They've
huge difference.
Destroyed.
I just had this conversation with somebody today.
The people are all still there, and we haven't managed to get them out. And you've destroyed all of their buildings.
I'm going to explain it to you.
Then the last thing I would say is something that the anti-Semites on Twitter and stuff, people who are really skeptical of Jews will continually say is that the Jews don't want Iran to actually be overthrown. They want Iran to be in as crippled a state as possible so that they have a credible ally or let's say enemy to orient against and assimilate Sunni allies into the Abraham Accords.
Leave Iran for a second. Enough with Iran.
Okay, but Iran is on the brink and Israel isn't assassinating any other guys. So I don't understand. It seems a little weird to me. Like it seems like if any time was now, or if there was ever a time to intervene in Iran, it would be now.
Well, we don't know what they are or are not doing or what the effects would be. That's way above our pay grade. But believe me, if Israel thinks that they can do something in their own interest, they will do it as long as the American president agrees to it. But I want to work because I had precisely, and this is really the end. This is very good. I had precisely this conversation today, and I told somebody, a journalist, I said, all through the war, the pro-Israel side kept saying to the other side, well, what would you have Israel do? What would you have Israel do after they were attacked? You've heard that Konstantin Kisin said it to Bassem Youssef, things like this. And the other side really never had an answer to it. And yet I don't think it was an effective argument because really what it was saying is, well, all our people were killed. Obviously, you don't expect us to just take it. We have to allow for a tit for tat. And people do understand to some extent, well, yeah, you have to do something. But in the end, you just put your finger on. In the end, if you just finish this in the same situation, but you've killed 40, 50, 60,000 people, then I don't know how to defend you on that. But this is where this is wrong. That's not the argument. The argument is the following. Prior to October 7th, Israel knew there was threats all around them. And the assumption was, like mutual assured destruction, the assumption was they will never do that because they know what we would do to them. And Israel assumed that its state of deterrence was in operation and was enough to rely upon. Then after October 7th, Israel realized, oh no, they will happily do it. Even if they know we might kill 100,000 of them, they will still do it. So immediately, Israel realized, holy motherfucking shit. There are 160,000 rockets in the north. Who knows how many rockets Iran has, plus what's going on in Gaza. If they had all coordinated, I don't know if they would have wiped us off the map, Israelis will say, but it would have been catastrophic. We think October 7th was bad. They could have simultaneously launched an attack and killed 10 times, 20 times, 50, destroyed all of Tel Aviv. So what Israel woke up to understanding was, oh my God, we just dodged that bullet. We can never allow ourselves to be at the mercy of them again. We were so stupid, we didn't even realize the threat that we were under. Such that, is part of my proof of it, if you read the papers, the first thing Gallant wanted to do after October 7th was attack Hezbollah, not Hamas. Why? Because of what I just said.
That's where they had the most success ultimately.
No, because it was his way. It was his recognition that this is not just about 1,200 people that died on October 7th. This is about, we have to end our situation. We are in big fucking trouble and we didn't even know it. We could have lost everything and we never even knew it. They have to go. They have to go. They have to go. So now you say, what's changed? Hezbollah is no longer a threat. Iran is no longer a threat. Hamas is, whatever Hamas is. But the fact is, if there was no Hezbollah and there were no Iran, and then there was October 7th, yeah, Israel would have gone back in and it would have been a tit for tat. And then they would have set about making sure that it could never happen again. They would not have killed, I don't believe, they would not have gone through the operation they went through if not for the fact it was part of an overall picture of a threat. And they have been successful, whether you like it or not in terms of the morality of it, they have been successful in vanquishing that threat. It was an existential threat. There is no more existential threat to Israel for the time being. That is what they've accomplished. And it's huge. It's huge. If you lived in Israel, you would know it's huge. Now, can they keep it? Will they reconstitute? Nobody fucking knows. But that's what they accomplished. It's a tremendous accomplishment. And that's not to say that they had to kill as many people as they did in Gaza. I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. The people who claim they know don't know. That's my answer. Okay, we got to go.
Can I say one thing in response?
Quickly.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Okay, quickly. I think that the material threat against Israel is similar to what exists with the Soviet Union's dissolution, where you have a nuclear state and as subsidiaries, a number of Islamic republics. When Russia goes, those Islamic republics will all gain splinter cell nuclear capacity. That problem is paralleled. It's identical with Iran. Should Iran become nuclear, Hezbollah, Hamas, all of these proxy groups will immediately be a threat to launch nuclear weapons. Then the annihilation of Israel that you're describing is credible.
Yeah, they should. They
right now,
they need to get rid of Iran, but they're trying. They're trying.
Yeah, right now, they had the most success in dismantling Hezbollah because it was a technical army that had been amassing for the better part of 2 decades.
It was an Iranian army.
Hamas, yeah, it was an Iranian-funded army, but it was an Arab army it didn't start and end in Lebanon.
Yeah.
It moved. It was literally a war. It was anyway.
Dude, of course,
the reason that there,
you said
the
quickly.
reason that there wasn't the same the reason that there wasn't the same success with Hamas, I think, is because there isn't a clear delineation between the population of the West Bank and Gaza and the people of Lebanon and Hezbollah as there is with Hamas and those people. So in that case, it's actually more about whether you think existentially a group of radicalized Islamists can coexist on the border with Israel. And I don't know if that's possible. I don't think that's possible. I haven't been shown anything.
It's an adage, in war, no plan survives contact with the enemy. To pretend that Israel should have had a drawing board plan of how they were going to conduct this war, and that if anything didn't come out the way they expected it to, this is a knock on Israel. It's just stupid to me. They made their best guess. There were unknowns.
Can you just contend with that direct thing that the population is still there? And they're even more hostile with more world support than before.
No, but they're less threatening. They're less threatening because they don't have Hezbollah in the north, and they don't have Iran anymore. To fund them.
Yeah, machines can come and go easily, but ideas are hard to get out of people. Weapons that balance can change quickly. It's more about having that population on your border that's intent on
But they couldn't just
destruction.
They couldn't just leave it in place. You can't have rockets coming from the east, from Iran, and rockets coming from the north, from Hezbollah, and from the south in Gaza. It's not going to happen.
No, I think they absolutely did the right thing with Lebanon. But I'm just suggesting to you is maybe that population is still there and they still have the same intentions towards Israel. So I'm not sure how in 20 years you can still say there's been.
That was never an option.
I guess you're right. Maybe
that was never an option. And maybe something. But you know what? It would not shock me. I know we got to go. Everybody wants to go. It would not shock me if Iran were to fall. Which, by the way, I think it's not going to fall. My guess is that they're just going to suppress this. But if it were to fall, and it was no longer run by, they don't have to love Israel, but if it was no longer run by Muslim jihadist fanatics, but just like regular, normal, everyday Muslim people who don't like Israel but don't want to end the world, then I think at that point, Hamas, without its benefactor, would be much more likely to say, you know what, I think it's time we put an end to this permanent fight. When they have,
I hope you're right.
When they have Iran at their back, they feel emboldened. All right, I'm punchy and groggy. I can't even speak anymore. I don't know how people broadcast. How does Joe Rogan do 2-3 hours? I mean, he couldn't take any pills or anything, does he?
Smokes a lot of weed.
All right, I think I need like Ritalin or something next time we do this. Oh, he hung up? Okay. Bye. Good night, everybody. Oh, hit the theme song. Oh, you don't have to. Fucking Natterman.